Welcome to Integral Talks, a podcast series brought to you by Integral Advisors, where we dive into the world of compliance, risk management, and due diligence, and provide you with expert insight and analysis to help you make more informed business decisions. Hello and welcome back to our podcast. I'm your host, Alberto Laportilla. Thank you for tuning in to Integral Talks. This week, dubbed Crypto Week by U.S. lawmakers, is set to be pivotal as Congress aims to advance two key bills. The Digital Asset Market Clarity Act proposes a comprehensive regulatory framework for digital assets and cryptocurrencies, and the Genius Act will establish a similar framework specifically for stablecoins. In his second administration, President Trump has prioritized strengthening U.S. leadership in digital financial technology with the goal of making the United States the crypto capital of the world. Unlike Bitcoin, whose value is based on speculation, stablecoins are a type of digital currency pegged to the value of an actual currency, such as a U.S. dollar or the euro. These are currently considered the safest digital currency and are gaining mainstream adoption. Notably, Jamie Dimon recently announced that JP Morgan has a stablecoin in development. Furthermore, major companies like Walmart, Amazon, and Expedia are reportedly considering launching their own branded stablecoins, aiming to leverage this growing momentum. I've invited Andy Warner to the podcast to shed more light on stablecoins and discuss what are the risks and opportunities that exist with this type of currency. Andy currently serves as VP of Partnership and Strategy at Transak. He's a business development executive with over 15 years experience in the tech industry with growth roles at Meta, Citi, and Paxos, focusing on the intersection between payments and blockchain technology. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So I want to talk. So stablecoins are all the rage, right? That's we're hearing quite a bit about it, and particularly this week as Congress is set to, well, they're sort of back and forth, but they're set to vote on some of the current legislation that's proposed. Can you talk a little bit about both? What I think there might even be a third bill that's being discussed. Could you talk a little bit about the Genius Act as it pertains to stablecoins, and then maybe the Clarity Act, and sort of what that means for the industry?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And this is certainly an exciting time to be having this conversation. I actually think there was some very positive news yesterday without getting into the comings and goings of the legislative process, but it seems that both bills have progressed and are progressing. I think the third bill that you're alluding to is got a little bit more political nuance to it. There's some ties there that they're, I think, negotiating still, but just broadly speaking, both the Genius and the Clarity Act, to me, are very, very positive steps, and they do allow for a lot of institutional adoption of crypto as an industry, as stablecoins in particular, with the Genius Act. I personally have a lot of experience working at a very, very regulated institution, and have seen exactly what that means in very practical terms for the adoption of crypto and blockchain technology, and specifically what it means for stablecoins. And like you alluded to in your introduction, this is allowing big, reputable, very recognizable brands, both in the payments and financial services industry, but also merchants, to enter and adopt stablecoin technology for mainly payments, cross-border, that kind of remittance use cases. And there's other things happening under the hood that I can also speak to. But generally what I think is going to help once these bills hopefully pass, ideally, as soon as this week, is that they will really regulate what that looks like with clear federal guidelines for issuers, for crypto companies, and for merchants and anyone touching a stablecoin, giving them kind of some comfort in regulatory oversight, which if you combine it with what, for instance, a stablecoin issuer can do in terms of publishing reserve audits and attestations and that sort of thing, will really mean that we're going to see a new wave of adoption into this industry in a very significant way. That transparency is really going to go a long way towards enabling and allowing treasurers and financial services professionals to go to their management and really, propose that they adopt stablecoin in a way that before this wasn't really necessarily as straightforward as it's going to be, in coming days and weeks.
So of the two, I know there's a third one you mentioned that's a little bit maybe more politically nuanced, but as far as the Genius Act, which I think deals directly with stablecoin, and then the Clarity Act, which is just cryptocurrency in general, correct?
Yep.
Do you think that those two today, as they're proposed, do enough to really encourage more adoption of is there more that can be done within these proposed bills?
I think some of the debate is around the Clarity Act more than the Genius Act. The Genius Act is pretty straightforward.
Right.
What it does is really put controls around, for instance, what you can do with your underlying assets and what kind of AML and KYC controls you have to put in place as an issuer, whether you can pay or not pay yield, that sort of thing. So I think the Genius Act is not really controversial in any significant way. So again, without getting into maybe the comings and goings of commerce, I think that one is pretty looking pretty good. As is the Clarity Act. Although the Clarity Act, the main thing is kind of how you consider other digital assets and which regulatory agency has oversight. Which again, just from an outsider's perspective, not being in the legislative process myself, I'm not in government. It's really a little bit of legislative haggling that hopefully they get to the bottom of, and we can all kind of move on with our lives and at least have some framework in place. This is just my personal point of view, saying that I prefer some legislation to no legislation because we're holding off on an ideal bill. So I appreciate the need for this thoroughness, but ideally both acts pass so we can have these compliance standards in place. Like I said, in terms of both registration, AML and KYC, cybersecurity controls, disclosure and audits and attestations and everything that will, like I said earlier, give a lot of comfort to big institutional players that want to come into the industry. So
I mentioned in the intro that JP Morgan, Expedia, Walmart, others, Amazon, I also read recently that they're looking to launch their own Bitcoin. What's can you talk a little bit about the benefit of those sort of household brands launching their own Bitcoin versus just adopting whatever it's out there already, Tether or the USDC? Like what's the benefit that a say sort of a Walmart would have in launching their own? Is it sort of like back when they were launching their own kind of corporate, debit cards or prepayment cards? Is it sort of like that? Do you see that's the reason? I mean, I understand that there's, for every dollar, every pegged dollar to the stable coin, there's a dollar held in reserve. Is it because of the yields that creates? Like, what are some of the benefits of just these companies looking to launch their own stable coins?
Yeah, I think you said the word Bitcoin in your question there, and you meant stable coins, right? And
yes, I did. Yes.
But that's a great point. I would separate it. So I'll make 3 comments. First of all, I would separate it in financial services and merchants.
Okay.
And the other comment I'll make is to your question, as what you're really doing is pegging a cash or cash equivalent to a token on the blockchain. What it's really doing is basically making a dollar, and I heard someone say this recently on a podcast. Almost you can teletransport a dollar. It's like a magical dollar. It has more features. Is the more cautious way to say it, right? So it's a dollar with more features, and what that means is that it's instant settlement. Universal access, basically anyone with an internet connection can access it. It's programmable. It has less barriers to entry. And that is a very, very powerful kind of added layer to the dollar itself, which is I like to quote because I think this is an amazing kind of a way to think about it. The dollar is one of the best products that the U.S. has ever created and exported. It's like an amazing product. The demand for this product is unreal, especially in the global South. So if we're sitting here in the U.S., We have very, very easy access to dollars and to financial instruments like high yield savings accounts. But universally, that's not the case if you think of most of Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. So just by the mere fact of making the dollar accessible to those markets, you're already adding a lot of value in and of itself for a stablecoin. So that's kind of like the framework of why stablecoins and why people are using them. And kind of like, to your point, they're pegged to $1, so they're not fluctuating. There is no volatility. There is counterparty risk. That is a significant risk that we have to consider. The issuer, companies like Circle, Tether, or Paxos, and many others, there's a lot more coming out. You have to trust that the way that they manage their reserves is trustworthy, and that's where regulation comes into play. The second comment is regarding financial institutions and why they would want to issue their own stablecoins. And we've seen big players like PayPal and a lot of others come out with their own stablecoin. I think PayPal is by far the biggest regulated and the biggest publicly traded company because they're bigger than Coinbase, right? To issue their own stablecoin. And what they are looking to do is basically create stickiness and create a revenue stream and participate in this global economy by making their platform and their stablecoin the de facto, they would like this to be the case, the de facto way that people participate in the stablecoin economy, so to speak. Right. Why a bank would do that is really up to their strategy. It's a very tricky thing to do. I'm not going to get into like all the technical layers that underlie issuing a stablecoin, but it's not as straightforward as one might think. It does require a lot of technical, regulatory, financial infrastructure. So that's why there's a lot of companies that come out and say, hey, we'll help you do that. You don't have to do that all yourself. But what it will allow them to do is basically generate new revenue streams. So you do have the ability to charge for part of the services, the ancillary services around a stablecoin, and also kind of create a lot more brand awareness and a lot more stickiness around their product itself. So that's on the financial services side. On the merchant side, I think it really gets interesting because if you're, say, Walmart, and similarly to what most huge merchants, and two big examples that always come to mind are both Target and Starbucks. They have their prepaid cards, and you can have your like Starbucks dollars, or you have, I think it's called Target Red or something, and you have your money sitting there. Right. If you go to pay with that payment method, you get a discount. With stablecoins, that gets like turbocharged. Basically, if you're Walmart and you offer a way, and maybe it's like already in the Walmart app to pay with the Walmart stablecoin, you're eliminating interchange fees. So the acquiring process when you swipe a credit card is expensive. You eliminate most of that cost. And at the same time, Walmart has a new revenue stream because they're managing the reserves. So if you think of a Walmart stablecoin that has billions of dollars in reserve, that reserve generates a yield by investing in treasury bills and other similar instruments that can then be passed on as a saving to the consumer. So you can give them a really, really powerful incentive to use the Walmart coin as a payment method.
Question on that, just so I can understand. When Walmart is managing the reserves are actually not sitting with Walmart, but they're sitting at some financial institution, I would imagine, right? The actual dollars are sitting, right? I mean, they're not going to actually. Okay. Just sort of understand what happens behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So what essentially would happen is that they would partner with a basically fund manager to manage those reserves. They would invest in cash equivalents, treasury bills, overnight repos, whatever, and then keep a management fee and pay the rest to Walmart for Walmart to do as they see fit. That can also have a stablecoin issuer in the middle, but by doing that, they control that entire stack. It's, again, like I mentioned, technically a little bit, it's non-trivial to manage like the smart contract and to get the adoption. So that's another, to me, important consideration. Once you issue a stablecoin, it has to be available. So you have to work with crypto exchanges, with crypto wallets, with custodians, with on and off ramps, with market makers to all have them accept and make your coin tradable. Otherwise, the liquidity is not there, the interoperability is not there, and you really get in trouble in terms of adoption. But if you're Walmart, you have the distribution. You already have millions of consumers walking through your doors, and that is a very powerful way to get people to adopt your stablecoin. You don't necessarily care about it being available on every exchange in the world.
So you've mentioned a lot of positives around stablecoins, which sort of translates to opportunities that exist, particularly now with once this regulatory clarity is in place. I would expect there's going to be a lot more momentum. I was doing some research and I saw that currently about 0.2% of the global payments are in stablecoins. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that trending in a very short period of time, say in the next 12 months? I mean, do you see that? I know we're still sort of learning more and more about this, and there's still the expectation on as far as how these acts are going to be implemented. But do you see that trending in a very quick way? Is this going to take years? Is it going to take months? Like in terms of more and more adoption of stablecoins as a payment method. I mean, are you totally bullish on on this, or are you kind of cautiously optimistic?
No, I put myself more in the bullish than the cautiously optimistic bucket. I think the reason for that is we're going to get to the point where it's not newsworthy to say Amazon is launching their own stablecoin. Bank of America, apparently, like I read this morning, is going to launch it. They've been talking about it for a long time. I don't see a world where we can put the genie back in the bottle. The rate of acceleration is going to be subject to a snowball effect, in my opinion.
Right.
We're going to continue to see this momentum. The volume's already there. The last I heard, and this is probably outdated at this point because of how quickly this industry is moving, is that we're seeing about $1 billion a month in like stablecoin throughput, transaction volume, and that should continue to accelerate. The one thing I will say as a board of caution, or as a stat of caution, is that we don't have that many crypto wallets out there right now. The total number, I think, is like less than 40 million, which is tiny. What we're probably going to see when all of these players come into the ecosystem, like I mentioned earlier as an example, if every Walmart and every Amazon consumer and every Bank of America account holder, et cetera, all get by de facto or by default, a crypto wallet, and very seamlessly and with very easy UX. So it's it's just click of a button and you already have a wallet. You have to manage any private keys and you don't have to like understand cryptography or anything like that. Then I think we're really going to see a lot of significant adoption, and that will continue to increase the market cap of stablecoin. If I have to make a prediction, I expect it to be above $1 trillion. We're like at 260 or something right now, 260 billion in the next 2 years and maybe sooner. So it could really get up to to the total money supply at some point. And when that happens, I think it's going to have very interesting repercussions for the financial ecosystem in the way that we know it today.
So you've talked a lot about, again, positives, pros, opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about just risks? Like, so what risks exist around stablecoins? And let's tackle this first from kind of, I was thinking of like just sort of two ways to tackle your response, which is one from perhaps obviously the financial institutional side. What are the risks for a financial institution vis-a-vis getting involved with stablecoins? And then also maybe on the other side, either from a consumer or from an investor, what are some of the risks that just people should be cognizant of?
I think it's important to understand what a stablecoin can do and what it cannot do.
Okay.
As an example, one thing that comes up a lot is it doesn't solve the FX aspect. You're still holding a dollar-denominated stablecoin, and if you are looking for yuan or pesos, you have to do an FX conversion, and you still have to pay for that. So that's one thing. The counterparty risk is still there. So you're still dealing with an issuer. You're still dealing with a crypto company. There's a crypto custodian somewhere in there. Somebody's holding your tokens, and there is risk there. The mismanagement of reserves is one of the things that makes me the most excited about the regulation coming up. But of course, you have to rely on the regulator itself working with an issuer and ensuring that they're doing things the right way. The other point on this to consider is that not all crypto issuers or stablecoin issuers, are regulated. So if there's ever a significant example of some reserve mismanagement that leads to any big stablecoin with significant market cap depegging, as we saw with USDC, unfortunately for a short period of time when we had that, the Silicon Valley issue, then we could really see some contagion effect in the industry, and that certainly has. It's something to be considered as a possibility. It's a non-zero chance. And then, like I said, the regulatory gaps, you really want to make sure that those are tight. That's why regulation is so important.
One of the, in doing research for our discussion today, sort of there seems to be some concern out there as far as risks about whether widespread adoption of stablecoins could divert funds from traditional banking, impacting the ability for a bank to lend funds. Do you see that as potentially leading to systemic risks in the traditional financial system? Do you care? Since you're very bullish on stablecoins, and I just kind of wanted to. I mean, interesting. Like what is how this is going to impact the traditional banking, traditional financial system. So do you see that as a potential risk? If there's sort of widespread adoption and away from kind of the traditional banking.
The first comment is I do care.
Okay, good.
That's fine. I'm actually much more on the side of traditional financial institutions. My work is more in the world of payments than it is in the world of crypto DJs and DeFi and meme coins.
DeFi, sure.
So the way I like to explain it at dinner parties is there's a speculative aspect and a non-speculative aspect to this industry. And on the speculative aspect, I personally believe in Bitcoin as a philosophy, but I don't gamble on meme coins. And on the non-speculative aspect, it's a lot more boring. I think blockchain turns into just payment rails and therefore not, like I said earlier, newsworthy. But I think boring is good. I think that we really want to make sure that we're operating in a world where things like how money moves around is under the hood and not something that is necessarily affecting
underground.
How people. Yeah, it's like you don't really need to understand how your email gets sent, and this is kind of the same story. You don't have, as an example, a different kind of dollar in your Cash App, in your Venmo, and in your Bank of America account, and I believe that's where we should get with stablecoins. In terms of the implications of tokenizing or putting most of the world's dollars in stablecoin, I'm with you. That's going to have an impact in how the financial ecosystem works. That if we get up to, let's talk in percentages, let's say today we're at a tiny percent of tokenized dollars. If we get to even 50 or 75%, which is a very significant amount, that is really going to change how much liquidity certain banks, certain parts of the ecosystem have available to do things like lending. So that will get us more into a narrower banking kind of world where the bank is not doing everything. So the implications of that are hard to predict, though. Yeah.
Yeah. A question on that, just as you're saying that, does that have any impact on the value of the US dollar? Like if it gets to 60, 70, 75% stable coins, does that impact? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud and asking you, does that have any impact on the kind of the value of the US dollar? And if so, how does that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. That's just, I'm curious to know if that would have any impact.
I think so. Without getting into inflationary macroeconomics,
of course, right.
the thing that stablecoin gets from a product perspective is, to me, it's almost dollar sovereignty. What it does is ensure that most of the world's trade finance, cross-border payments, remittances, the world's reserve currency continues to be the dollar. By putting it on the blockchain in this way, you're making it very, very easy for parts of the world's financial ecosystem that today don't have an easy path to access dollars. If you step back from that, I think the risk is in inaction. That's why I think this regulatory movement is so powerful.
We know, okay, so we have the US dollar coin and Tether, these are tied to pegged to the US dollar. And I mentioned in the intro other, currencies, but are there like stable coins that are pegged to the euro, or I know Singapore and other countries are much more advanced in terms of stable coin adoption. Are those countries pegging is it pegged to the US dollar in those foreign countries, or is it pegged to local currency? I'm just trying to understand a little bit more of the ecosystem around stable coins.
So the probably second biggest is the Euro coin. Circle actually issues it. It's called Euro C or Euro C. Right. And you have significant stable coins in Brazil, Mexico, and certain parts of Asia for sure.
But those stable coins, I'm sorry, in Brazil and Mexico are pegged to what? To what currency?
To local currency. They're pegged to their local currency.
Okay.
And the euro. What I will say, though, is that 99.9% of, and the number might even be low, so it's probably 9.999% of the total market cap of stablecoin is in dollars.
Okay.
The reason for that is you really need to still get to a point of tokenizing more of the total money supply before it makes a ton of sense to start working on others. However, for regulatory reasons, certain countries, like I believe I want to say Malaysia, but there's certain jurisdictions in Africa and Southeast Asia, especially, that forbid foreign denominated stablecoins. So you do see a demand for a local stablecoin, and in terms of the ability to move in and out domestically, it makes sense. But there's still so much, greenfield ahead of us in the dollar-denominated stablecoin world that for me, that's where we're seeing the most interest. I don't think that's going to be threatened in any significant way, unless we see some catastrophic shift in the regulatory environment whereby we cannot have US dollar denominated stablecoins, or something interferes with the ability of stablecoin issuers to buy treasury bills or that sort of thing.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how, over the next sort of 10 years, how the regulations adapt to whatever happens in the marketplace. But I think for now, we're seeing with these proposed acts in the US, at least, it's really just to make it a little bit more clear, have a framework, and then let's get it going. And then I think the regulators and let's say the regulators will adapt to what happens over the course of time. I wanted to ask you, this, I know you're in payments, so I'm sure you love the concept of financial inclusion, but and that's also, I love that as just a concept as well. It's just you're able to offer traditional banking services or payment services to parts of, say, Latin America that don't traditionally have. They're underbanked or they're unbanked. Talk a little bit about, again, stable coins, since that's the topic of our discussion, and how you see that encouraging financial inclusion, perhaps even expanding in Latin America, which is you and I work in this region.
I think it's unbelievably powerful.
Right.
The very kind of viscerally felt story that I could share with you is when I worked at Meta, we did a little bit of digital banking innovation, essentially allowing people to open a bank account, do payments, send a P2P, top up their phone using Meta's messaging apps like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger.
Right.
And some of the research we did gave us these amazing insights into how powerful and how beneficial to people's actual day-to-day lives it was to offer these instruments. As an example, I believe it was in the Philippines, we found that people would have to, and these are very underserved kind of cohorts, would have to literally get on a canoe to cross a channel, a body of water, to go pay their electric bill. With their entire families in tow. This isn't people that would hire a nanny, and they would do this like once a month to ensure that they didn't get their power cut off. And this was the only way because they were paying in cash. And once they got there, they would have to wait in line in the heat and in the sun or whatever to do that, which is like obviously a very far cry from the one click or even auto pay that you can set up in a developed country. And offering someone the ability to go from the situation I described where they're taking half a day off that they don't have available because they're probably working multiple jobs, to go wait in line and pay their electric bill, to being able to use the device in their pocket to do that is an unbelievable shift. Coming back to your question, if you can say to someone, take your hard-earned cash that is subject to a deflationary currency because of monetary policy in that country, like my native country of Argentina, and there's there's inflation, so prices are going up. Therefore, you're really subject to your saving power eroding without any involvement of your own, to a world where you can take those savings and put them in dollars, so you're keeping them stable. And on top of that, you add a yield because maybe your stablecoin partner or the wallet provider that you're using is paying you, say, 4%. But 4% in dollars to someone in, like I said, Argentina, Nigeria, Venezuela, or any one of these countries, is unbelievably powerful. It's unbelievably different from what you're doing today. So the kind of shift in the financial inclusion of going from having to save your money and, for instance, as soon as you get paid, spend it as soon as possible in order to not erode your savings, to, okay, I'm going to buy dollars. Maybe I'll even get paid in dollars if I'm a remote worker and my payroll provider offers this option. I get paid in stablecoin. And I'm holding that in a wallet, and that wallet is paying me a yield. So my savings are going up. And then maybe I have a debit card or credit card associated to that account. And when I swipe it at the grocer on the corner, they just draw from that balance, convert it to local fiat currency, and then pay the merchant. That's a night and day shift in some people, in their financial lives. And again, I go back to the inclusionary aspect of stablecoin. There aren't any restrictions around this in the sense that all you really need to have is access to the internet, so like a phone, and then you download a wallet, you do some KYC, maybe they ask you to upload your ID, and then you're off to the races. So that to me is a very powerful shift. And if you extrapolate that across millions of users around the world, I believe stablecoin can be a transformational technology in increasing global GDP.
Yeah, I noticed that again, just doing research for this, that Tether is very prominent in some of the kind of lesser developed countries of the world, Nigeria, other countries in Africa, Vietnam, Indonesia to some degree. Is that, I mean, you're seeing more adoption, particularly in Africa. You're seeing countries that are adopting more and more stable coins. I guess they see the value and the ability to adopt more inclusionary sort of policies and for their citizens, right? I mean, I would think that's why when you just research Tether and you research, where it's more adopted, and you see countries like the ones I mentioned, more kind of lesser developed countries that are adopting it a lot more advanced than, say, the U.S. So I guess that sort of speaks to that, to what you were saying about financial inclusion.
Yeah, Tether, they do a lot of amazing work, in my opinion, because of how large they are, how distributed they are. One of the key things of stablecoin that Tether has done very well is that you really need to have the liquidity available for people to on and off ramp, to get in and out of the token, to have all these applications available to them. I hesitate to think of examples of applications don't hesitate. It's hard for me to see examples of applications that don't accept Tether. There's notably some changes in Europe with MiCA regulation coming out that forbids certain stablecoins. But they, they're also investing in a lot of these jurisdictions. They have a very active venture arm. So in my opinion, what they're doing is very, very powerful in how successful they've been and the scale they have, which allows them to really be effective at what they're doing.
You mentioned MiCA. What is it that they speak to? What it is that they're looking to prohibit and around stable coins? I mean, certain types of stable coins that they're looking to prohibit adoption.
Yeah, I mean, the key component is how the kind of the obligations of reserves, and there's a lot of restrictions there. And I believe that it really is a little bit stricter in how much needs to be held in cash.
Okay.
So that is kind of like a big change for some of the issuers, and so they've opted not to get regulated.
Okay. Let me ask you about. I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. We've seen, well, obviously, the market is very different than it was in March, but with the original kind of announcements of tariffs, we saw a lot of market volatility, and Bitcoin continue to the value of Bitcoin continued to increase, and it still is increasing, and it's able to sort of it's remained stable. Bitcoin. To me, that's indicative of an asset that's here to stay. But when you look at stable coins versus Bitcoins, I mean, do you envision a world where both coexist? I mean, I know that is today, but I'm saying it's 10 years into the future. Do you envision, because one is, just purely speculative, right? And the other one is tied to a fiat currency. When you look in your crystal ball, maybe 5-10 years down, maybe 10 years down the road, further out, do you see a world where both coexist?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
I think they serve different purposes. Essentially, a stablecoin is a payment instrument. There's some value for corporate treasuries, and like I said, the personal maybe savings account that you can create by holding your savings in stablecoin in a crypto wallet and maybe getting a yield. That's very powerful. But that's what stablecoin is for. Bitcoin is, to me, an instrument that allows you to understand how you can essentially protect yourselves from things like government spending and debt, and just essentially the expanding of the money supply. And I personally believe that Bitcoin is going to continue to hold its value. So to me, it's a very powerful instrument in that regard. Even the recent volatility, like you said, has been within a narrow band. So I think it's proven that it's going to continue to be the case. And I think that they serve a very different purpose, but they both have a place. I don't see Bitcoin going anywhere. On the contrary, I believe that in the next 10 years, everybody listening and you and I are probably going to regret not buying more Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. I think, we've covered a lot of ground. And obviously this is a topic that we could discuss for hours, but, I kind of want to, we covered at least all the questions that I had for you. So Andy, thank you for your insight. I do, as everyone who's watched or listened to his podcast over the last couple of years, knows that, I finish every podcast on a lighter note, and I ask a question that's near and dear to my heart, which is music. I'm a very I'm an enthusiastic fan of music, all different kinds of music, and I wanted to ask you a question about music. And I know, just looking at your background before you dove into the world of digital payments, you worked several years ago for that was Sony Music and Warner Brothers Music in Buenos Aires, I'm assuming, right? When you were living down there.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to talk to you about that experience, but then just kind of start with a question of Argentine rock music, right? Some of us know it well, but talk a little bit about your interest in that type of music. Are you a fan? Were you a fan then? Are you a fan today? And if so, which are the bands that really jump out in your mind when you think about Argentine music?
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of Argentine rock and roll. I think that it's a part of our culture that we need to stay connected to in a very significant way nowadays. That there's so much like other kinds of music. That personally, I also enjoy hip hop and rap and the urban side of it. But rock and roll is very near to my heart. I was born in the '80s, so to me, rock and roll is everything. I even enjoy some heavy metal here and there, including Argentine heavy metal. So to me, the by far the best and the biggest has to be Charly Garcia. So you have to start there. But I also enjoy Estereo, Gustavo Cerati, rest in peace.
Right.
And I believe that there's a lot of good music also put out by Luis Alberto Spinetta, so El Flaco Spinetta, and any one of his projects. So you can't go wrong if you dive deep into anything done by those three men. And yeah, working in the music industry for a couple of years, like you mentioned, was unbelievably exhilarating. I was in my 20s, and there was a lot of excitement. This was actually really interesting as a person that grew up with the internet booming. This was when digital music was starting to take off. So right. I was there and I got the opportunity to participate in, the first iTunes store where you could buy an MP3 for $1 and that sort of thing. And we were, our team was literally digitizing our catalog and uploading it to Apple's servers. And also since this is a long time ago, we were selling, ringback tones and ringtones. So ringback tones, for those that are too young to remember, meant that when you called someone, instead of like just ringing, you would hear a track. And this was in partnership with the mobile telcos. So there was a lot of excitement in the time, and then also got to go to a lot of concerts, meet some artists, have a lot of fun. But also, I like to say, thankfully, I was only in it for two years or so. Because it's exhausting. When you're going to a concert on Tuesday, another one on Thursday, working a full-time job, and then it's the weekend. There's always social activities. It's an industry which, you might not be surprised, has a lot of events and a lot of things going on all the time. That like I said, I was in my 20s. Now that I'm a little bit past that, I just think about it and say it must be tiring to have like a full life and job and also have all these social activities going on. But it was a lot of fun, and I wouldn't give it back for anything.
Did you ever get a chance to see Gustavo Cerati perform live?
I did not. It was a shame. He was honestly, to me, just such an icon and one of the most talented musicians to come out of Argentina. I still listen to his music. I think it's unbelievable. But yeah,
I never. I mean, to me, like, I grew up in Miami, and that music, it didn't reach me until much later. I think more so in terms of Latin rock. Maná was very popular in South Florida, and back in the sort of early 90s, that was the band. I learned about Soda Stereo and Cerati and other folks like Andrés Calamaro much later, maybe into my kind of late 20s, early 30s, when I had a friend of mine who was Chilean, who she had seen these guys perform time and again, and in Santiago. But I still listen to Soda Stereo. In fact, I listen to more Soda Stereo today than I do Maná. I think Cerati was just a true talent and visionary, and really took Argentine rock music to a whole new stratosphere, I thought. So may you rest in peace. Andy, thank you. I think this was wonderful. I appreciate, again, your input and your insight. And we got to chat a little bit about music, so that's always fun. those of you that liked what you heard or saw, please click on the link below. And we appreciate you always staying in touch with us. And we look forward to the next podcast coming up in about a month or so. So thank you. And Andy, thanks again. Take care.
Thank you for your time.